everybody, and welcome to Early Childhood Discussions, Conscious Conversations, a podcast that's brought to you by the Grow New Jersey Kids Technical Assistance Center North. I'm so excited today to have Gary Romano of Civitas Strategies here to talk with us. Early childhood providers are looking for any way to mitigate the impact of the coronavirus on their businesses. In today's show, I'm joined by Gary, who's going to talk about grants and funding that you may be eligible for. Gary's currently working on a project funded by the Henry and Marilyn Taub Foundation to help childcare providers in Passaic County navigate the pandemic. Specifically, his team is providing free technical assistance to help childcare providers increase revenue and decrease costs over the next few months. And one of the beautiful things that has happened during the pandemic is that programs and organizations have come together to support each other. And although the foundation is providing funding specifically for technical assistance for Passaic County providers, Gary has been gracious to provide all kinds of information and support and tools that his company has created to support programs throughout the state of New Jersey. So Gary, thanks so much for joining us today. And
Pleasure to be here.
We know that there are not a lot of grants out there right now, but there are some opportunities very specific available within the state of New Jersey. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And as you said, there's unfortunately, I'm not coming to you with a grand slam or anything like the Paycheck Protection Program was, but we do have kind of some singles and doubles, right, that are out there that are in play right now. The first one I would say, at the state level is the Family Childcare Stabilization Grant. So this is the grant that, many of you know came out a couple of weeks ago. It is moving very quickly. This funding that the state is drawing from came down from the federal government and needs to be expended by the end of the calendar year. Wow. So end of December, it's got to be gone. So what it does is it provides funding for costs you already have that are COVID related. So PPE, cleaning supplies, other costs that have been bumped up because of COVID, right? And the grants range depending on your size. They start at $2,500 for family care providers, move up as you have more people in your enrollment. You should be applying through your CCR&R for it. And it is a very simple form. I've seen the form. You're going to put in some basic information about you, right? One of the tricks I heard that I'll share is that it'll say on it program name and director name. If you are not a corporation, if you do not have a doing business as, if it's just like you at home, right? Like if it was Lori's home-based childcare, she would put Lori in program name, Lori in director name, right? So keep that consistent. That's one trick I've heard. And then, you're putting in the number of kids you have, and then you're putting in some budget around, different types of supplies such as PPE, cleaning supplies, additional classroom equipment that you may have needed, those sorts of things that have been additional costs because of the pandemic. It is, most of the CCR&Rs are doing it kind of, you get a portion up front for applying, and then you get the balance of it due when you provide the receipts. One other trick to this one that we heard from the state was that technically the program ends the end of December. However, the state needs to process all of your paperwork before the end of the month. So what they're recommending is get your receipts in, get all your paperwork in by December 18th. Get it done. So this is one where you're already going to spend the money. Why not get out there? Why not get some cash for it? right? So that is one right off the bat from the state level that I would say, if you haven't done it, get out there, do it. Another one from the state that I would want you to definitely look at is the PPE, access program. So this is a program that was just recently launched by the state. It normally provides a 10% discount on PPE. I don't know if it's still open, but as of last week, they were actually, for the launch, doing 25% off PPE. It's another one that is super easy to register for. You go to ppe.covid19.nj.gov. You can register right on there. You do a very simple 3-question questionnaire, right? You have to have fewer than 100 employees, right? You have to say that you're registered in good standing with the state, both in the Department of Labor and Department of Taxation, right? So if you're a functioning business, those are your questions. Then you answer some contact information, and then you register with their vendors like Staples and others, right? So this is a big deal. If, as we've talked about previously, PPE is one of those costs that's really creeped up on people. And so as that's happened, right, this has put even more stress on your business. So here's a way to save 10%. They have the 25% that was at least last week. It may still be going. I didn't check this morning, but do know that they said they were potentially having other additional 25% off days coming up in the future. One of the tips on this one to think about is this can be paired with the stabilization grant, right? So in other words, you can get your discount on your PPE through the state, and then through the stabilization grant have that balance paid for. So that would stretch that stabilization grant money even further. So something to think about is, if you are going to do the stabilization grant, maybe get online, register, get that PPE at the discount so that you can make that money go even further for you and for your kids. Another one that we'd like to talk about is the school-age childcare subsidy. So for those of you who are subsidy providers, for those of you who aren't, the subsidy has been extended for full day for school-age children in households making $150,000 or less. That's an important caveat, right? So that bar has been pushed up. At the same time, you can include these kids in your program. And that does end at the end of the year, right? But do know it's out there. They should, parents can go online and they can do the paperwork online. There is, as far as I can tell, no employment test to it. It's pretty streamlined because they're trying to get parents the help they need. And, I know that some providers have been a bit intimidated, right? Because what they tend to think of is, am I going to have a whole classroom of 13-year-olds, right? That I suddenly, oh no, what do I do with them, right? You might, but what we're seeing a lot of providers do in the field is that they are going and asking families about their siblings. So, are there older siblings at home who could qualify and therefore could be part of your effort, right? And bring that subsidy to you. So there's a couple of things embedded in that, right? One is, as Lori's talked about in terms of marketing your program, those families that know you are going to be much, much more likely to entrust you with another child since they already trust you with the first child. Second of all, the ages are likely to have close proximity. So you won't be getting a 13-year-old necessarily. You might be getting a 5-year-old, right? Or a 6-year-old, which may be a little less of a burden on your operation, right? For those of you who might be scared. But do know that money is out there. As you know, many of the districts in New Jersey are either full remote or hybrid. So there's definitely a need out there. And you're already in the subsidy program, many of you, so this becomes a way to extend it. The last program I wanted to talk about, which is technically a federal program but it's administered at the state level, is the Child and Adult Food Program. And so, some of you may already be doing this program. We know that for quality care, for a lot of kids, getting food at your facility, at your home, is absolutely critical for their development, critical for them to stay healthy. The Child and Adult Food Program helps to provide funding for those snacks, for those meals. Snacks are up to 96 cents per child, meals up to $3.51, depending on the meal and some other factors. It's open to for-profits and nonprofits both, right? And this could be for existing food services. If you have them, you can enter the program if you're already doing them for free. If you are not doing them and you want to have a differentiator, right, and maybe offer families something new, this might be a way to do it for less money. This is something that, depending if you are a center, you apply at the state level through the Department of Agriculture. If you are a family care provider, you're going to do it through your CCR&R. So in Passaic, that's 4 C's. There's a little bit of paperwork to go through and some training. Don't get intimidated by it. The paperwork is not nearly as bad. I know because I look at all this stuff myself, when I first looked at the paperwork, my first glance was, there's a lot. But then I settled down. I went through it line by line. It's not too bad. You're going to have to list out your kids. You're going to have some attestations on, your participation in the program, right? But, if you can get through the paperwork and the training and you are providing food already for free, this is a great way to start recouping some money. And a lot of providers, not nearly as many providers, do it as could and should. And again, it's going to give you something to offer your families beyond what you currently are offering.
Yeah. Thanks so much for sharing all that information, Gary. I have to say, during this whole pandemic, I am really proud to be a New Jersey resident. I think our state has come together in amazing ways. And in the early childhood community, we have so many partners out there who are helping to amplify the voices of parents and the childcare centers and the family childcare providers to help the people who can make financial decisions at the state level recognize the needs that are out there. And so the fact that we've got these specialized funds that are available for childcare programs in the state of New Jersey is wonderful. I was on a workshop, a virtual workshop that was being conducted by an organization out in the Midwest, and there were people all over the country. And I was talking about the CEFI initiative through Montclair's Center for Autism and Infant and Early Childhood Mental Health, and the CEFI, the Social Emotional Formation Initiative, and talking about how CEFI had been providing social emotional support and opportunities for the early childhood community, both for the staff as well as supports in working and helping with classroom and home situations that were coming about as a result of the emotions coming up with the pandemic. So New Jersey has just been doing great things, and it's wonderful to hear about these opportunities for finances, like which is something that's desperately needed right now.
Yeah.
I know I've heard of a number of programs that have been really successful in getting their applications in there and getting approved for the New Jersey Child Care Stabilization Grant. I think the local resource and referral agencies have provided a lot of support and balance. Family child care providers applying directly through them, and childcare centers applying on the registry system, the njccis.com. So it's just wonderful. What's available at the federal level? We know that New Jersey's doing a lot to support what's happening in early childcare.
Yeah, I mean, New Jersey is doing a lot, and unfortunately, at the federal level, we're still pretty slim. We're going to talk a little bit about what might be coming down the pike, but right here, right now, there's two programs we've been talking about, and we have some simple one-pagers on both of these that are available. If you email us at info@civstrat, civstrat.com, absolutely free. We'd be happy to share them in English and Spanish. The first one is for those of you who did not apply for the PPP. If you did not apply and you have employees, W-2 employees, not 1099s, but W-2 employees, and you had a full or partial shutdown, which is like all of you, right? And made 50% or less than you did last year at the same time, right? So you have to pass those tests, which I think there are a few childcare providers in New Jersey who wouldn't pass those tests, not tests you necessarily want to pass, but here we are, right? Then you can apply for this employee retention tax credit, which provides up to $5,000 per employee that you retained through the pandemic. And so these can be ones that you did through emergency funds, right? If you were providing emergency care, it could be ones that you're retaining now, right? And so this is a significant opportunity. There are a few other requirements. Look at that two-pager for them, but it's pretty easy to get through. And I'm not just kind of throwing that at you and saying, oh, it's easy. It is relatively easy. And for those of you who didn't get the PPP, this gives you an option to recoup some money if you didn't get in on it. The other one I want to talk about for a little bit longer, and this is one where I don't understand why, and I've talked to people across the nation, and most small businesses are not using this, especially childcare, and I don't know why. But back on April 1, part of the CARES Act included the Families First Coronavirus Leave. So bear with me. It takes a little bit to understand how it works, right? But the leave applies to businesses under 500 employees, which is most of you, right? And what it does is it allows your employees, and if you are an employee, this covers you too, or if you're a business owner. So if you're a sole proprietor, you're covered under this as well. So I want to make sure you hear that, because I think a lot of business owners who are sole proprietors, those of you who are home-based or maybe with a small center, you're in this, right? So what it does two things. First of all, it provides you up to 10 days of sick leave. And we're going to talk about how this is paid for by the federal government. This is not paid for by you. Up to $511 a day, right, based on your current pay. And again, this is for you or your W-2 employees. If you have illness because of COVID, you're caring for a member who has COVID, or you're under quarantine. So I know a lot of you that I've spoken to are really worried about what happens if, when you have to quarantine your center or have to quarantine a classroom for 2 weeks because there's been contact with a kid who has COVID or an adult who has COVID. So think about this. Keep this in mind. So that's part A. Part B of the leave is that you could use those 10 days or, with it, right, and or use 12 weeks at 2/3 pay, up to $200 a day, to care for a child who's at home. There's two ways that the federal government has clarified the way this works that are really important. One is school closure, and they're at home because of a school closure, let me be clear, right? So if you choose to keep your kids at home, sorry, it doesn't work. But if there's a school closure, and school closure is included in this, is remote school. So if you're on remote learning, you have, let's say, a teacher who's at home on remote learning, and you want to make sure they come back to you when things start to get better It's a good way to pay them for free, 2/3 rate, right? The other caveat is that it can be used part-time. So if you have a teacher, or if you are, because I know some providers, some family care providers are closed a couple of days a week to take care of their own children who are on remote learning. Again, this applies to you as the business owner. This applies to your employees. So this is a way where you could recoup 2/3 of your pay, right, for up to 12 weeks. And it could just be 1 day a week. It could be 2 days a week. It could be all 5 days a week. So this is it's a really interesting one. You know, if you are, now here's the tricky part, right? So people get intimidated by it because it is a refundable tax credit. Forget about that word for a minute, or that expression. Put it out the door, right? And let's just say you need to essentially get a reimbursement. There's two ways that that happens. If you're a corporation, right, whether you're a nonprofit or for-profit, you fill out a Form 7200. And again, we have a one-pager on this. We're happy to share it, even as a link to the form. That's in English and Spanish. Early on in the pandemic, one of my folks took this leave, you know, back in April. I filled out the form personally multiple times. So I can attest to you, it is not that hard to do. It's one page. You fill out the form. We did it 3 times for my company. All 3 times, from the moment I faxed it to when the check came, was 2 weeks. The hardest part was faxing it because I don't own a fax machine. It was literally 2 weeks. So it's very simple, and you can do it as many times as you want if you're a corporation. You know, if let's say Lori had her center and she wanted to do it every week, she could do it every week, right? And they'll just keep sending the checks as appropriate. The other way to do it, if you're a sole proprietor, it does get a little trickier. So what I would recommend first and foremost is track the time on a spreadsheet, on a piece of paper, have some sort of record on how you're tracking the time. You can deduct this from your quarterly estimated taxes. So those of you who are paying quarterly estimated taxes, you're allowed to say, well, I had $1,000 of leave. I owe you $2,000 for quarterly taxes, federal government. I'm only going to pay you $1,000, right? Because I get to pocket it in the meantime. If let's say you go over, right, that you've used more leave than you have quarterly taxes, the rest of it will come off your 2020 tax return. So you have to wait for that last part. But in the meantime, if you're doing your quarterly taxes, this is a way to start recouping that money, not as fast as the corporations, I admit, but you can start recouping that money. And like I said, this is a big one because so few people are using it. It ends in December, at the end of December. But those who have used it have been very satisfied with it. There's very little paperwork. You don't have to send in like an affidavit saying, you know, Lori showed me her COVID test or something. It's pretty much on the honor system in that regard. And it's a way that, like I said, you know, especially if you're going to hit those 2 weeks, if you're dealing with remote learning or hybrid learning, as so many of us are, if you're worried about losing some of your employees because of that, there's a number of ways to use this vehicle to really help you out and help you retain that staff, help you stay sane, help you stay solvent, or at least recoup some of the money that you might otherwise be spending.
Wow, what a wonderful program. And as you described, it's not being used. I'm just thinking, over the course of the last week, I get a chance to talk to a lot of child care center directors, and I spoke with 2 different child care center directors this week, who both are dealing with their very first positive COVID situation and needing to follow the protocols of, you know, closing classrooms and just, if, you know, this would be one thing to help them get through this. Because as we know, many early childhood programs don't offer paid sick time in the amount that might be needed if a classroom has to close for an extended period, or, you know, they may offer the 5 days that New Jersey has required, but here we are at the very end of the year. And so those 5 days might have already been used. And so now there's a way for that staff member to get paid, as you said, at 2/3, if the center needs to close some classrooms due to COVID situations.
Well, the 2/3, if they have to quarantine, it's full rate.
Oh, okay.
Yes, it's full rate for those 2 weeks. If you
Mhm.
have to close, it's 2/3 if you're caring for a child at home who's out of school.
Oh, okay.
So an important point, and the other thing just to underline it is you're absolutely right. There are few providers who can afford sick time in the way that we're talking here. More importantly, or maybe even a bigger issue is most of the directors, most of the owners are not affording themselves this kind of time because they
Right.
can't, right? I know so many providers who are eating every cost they can
Hmm.
keep their center going, and so or their home-based if their home-based providers keep their enterprise going, so this becomes a way for you to be covered as well, right? So that if you are that home-based provider, or if you're at the center and you've been exposed, now you have to quarantine, this becomes a way to at least recoup some of that money,
Hmm.
right? And for your center or for your home-based enterprise.
Hmm. Wow. Yeah.
And like I said, the form is not too bad. And if you have many of you who, are larger operations who have payroll companies, you'll actually find they will have a form that will take you through this.
Mhm.
Um, so definitely one to think about.
Mm. Wow. Yeah, I just thinking about how, the state of New Jersey is providing funding to families of school agers, um, and how that is helping families, but it's also indirectly helping the child care community, by allowing them to be paid for services that they're offering to support, virtual learners. And here's another way. So if you've got those virtual learners, but then your program needs to be quarantined, like all these different ways that organizations, agencies, the state, the federal government is coming together to try to figure out ways to help, which is wonderful. And then we've got somebody like you who's able to break this down and share the information in a way that helps people recognize what's available to them and how they can access these funds. Um, yeah. So, what kind of things should we expect in the future, Gary?
So I think it's, unfortunately my crystal ball is very murky. Not nearly as clear as I would like it to be. I mean, I think, let's talk about when first, and then let's talk about what second. I
Oh,
think there is a small shrinking chance that we will see something before the new year, right? I think there is still, it's interesting because when you look at what's happening in the media, there's really no movement, no conversation. I am hearing from some folks that I know in Washington, D.C. and trust that there's some things that are happening behind the scenes. So there may be more movement there than you realize. Um, if it doesn't happen soon, right? Like, so I would say by the first week of December, we are likely looking at after the administration changes and then probably a little bit of time after that. So probably not until February. So I'm just being honest with folks that, if they're, and that's, optimal. That's assuming that the new administration hits the ground running, gets something passed, and gets it out there. I think in terms of what we will see, I think we are liable to see some form of the PPP in the very least, right? So the Paycheck Protection Program still does have funding in it, and this has been a point that both parties have really homed in on and said, there's already funding approved for this program. How could it be retooled? What we also hear is both sides of the aisle having a real interest in women-owned businesses owned by people of color, businesses in marginalized communities, and much smaller businesses. So instead of 500 or lower, how do you start getting down to 50 or lower,
mhm.
right? So for a lot of the people watching this, right, like this is you, right? This is great. Um, my guess is that if we do see some movement before the end of the calendar year, it would be in these funds. That what would happen is Congress would get around releasing the remaining funds, at least for now. If we have to wait till February, hopefully it would be part of a larger package. Some of those programs, as you heard, like Families First, end in December. And so there is some talk about what might happen after December. Might they be extended? I would say definitely keep your eye out. I know you're overburdened. I was recently talking with a provider in the TA session, and she confided in me that she started deleting every email she gets now, from the CCR&R and from others, because it's just like too much. And I said to her, I know it's a lot, but like when this stuff comes down, it's going to come down fast.
Right.
So you're going to want to react, right? If they reopen the PPP funds, I think there's going to be a big flood and rush for them because people are hungry for them. A lot of businesses that were better in the spring are not now. So as hard as it may be, even if it's just skimming them, skim each one of those emails, make sure there isn't a new grant coming out. Definitely look at each and every one, because you don't know when something's going to come out from the Fed or from the state, right? The state just is coming out with some of these grants and some of these opportunities, as they can secure the money. And so, definitely keep an eye out for those. And I should also say, and we haven't really talked about it much because of the audience, but there are also some local grants that are happening. For example, Essex County just announced a relief effort for leases, businesses with leases, right? So definitely, this is a time where, as much as it may be hard, skim each and every one of those emails.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that whole idea of together we're better, that the help and the assistance and the support could be coming from your local government. It could be coming from the state. It could be coming from the feds, and the vehicle that it's coming on. It could be coming from your local resource and referral agency or technical assistance center. It could be coming from Child Care Aware of New Jersey, Advocates for Children of New Jersey. Information is going to be shared, and it's going to need to be acted upon quickly. So I think that is such an important point. And as you said, a number of these funds are ending with the end of the calendar year. So there's continuing to be some funding left, and it's important to act quickly to be able to get what's available that you're eligible for.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Gary. Do you have anything else you want to talk about in terms of grants, or do you think you covered?
That was it. I feel like we talked about a lot. I wish there was more. I do.
Oh, you gave us so much great information. So I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. And I look forward to talking to you again.
Same here. Take care.